Hey guys, and welcome to Quality Shot. It's another preview. It's Novak Djokovic versus Carlos Alcaraz. What a match we have on our hands. Novak Djokovic coming past her, catching absolute cruise control in straight sets past the pole. And Carlos Alcaraz, of course, beating his idol, the 35-year-old 21 Grand Slam champion, Rafa Nadal, in 3 sets. The first time he's ever beaten him. And he just thought, well, I've lost twice to you already. It's time to finally make my move, my big inroad. And not just that, but I'm going to make a huge step in my career. And I'm going to potentially have, well, I'm potentially going to have a moment in my career that could be defining, a defining moment which then helps me kick on and really start to motor. And I say really start to motor because, I mean, he's been motoring already. 122 in the world this time last year. He's now in the live rankings, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7. Novak Djokovic, of course, still the world number 1. And look, he goes into this in some people's eyes as the underdog. Ironically, now you might be saying, how is that the case? But it's because Alcaraz has been in some fantastic form. Djokovic is still pretty rusty. He hasn't played a lot of matches this year because of, because of the, I guess, the rules and regulations in place. Obviously, he didn't play Australia and hasn't played a few of the tournaments like the Sunshine Double, for example, wasn't able to participate. So he's been, I think, slow to get out of the blocks. And I've made the analogy, and I think at the moment it's almost like he's nearly there. The old car, which takes time to start and then get going and kind of run smoothly and efficiently. And I think he's almost there. He's not too far off. So that's a good sign for him. There's still definitely some bits and bobs that I think, aren't quite up to scratch. And I don't think, I'd say he's around 70%. But I don't know if that's going to be enough against Alcaraz, who at the moment is playing incredibly well. Now, the biggest question mark going into the tournament for me was how Alcaraz's body would hold up. It was also heavily strapped after, he'd played in Barcelona. And my prediction was actually he'd make the final, then he'd lose. And my prediction was he'd lose to Yannick Sinner. That's gone completely haywire. He could still make the final. I have predicted and did predict that he would beat Nadal and Djokovic. He's done 1 out of the 2 so far. And spoiler alert, I think that he will beat Djokovic. That's my prediction anyway. But you just can't count out the number 1, can you? I mean, it would not surprise me whatsoever if Djokovic beat him even in straight sets. Now, let's look at it from a tactical point of view because it's the first meeting between the two. And I want to talk a bit about the dynamics in that before we finish up. So the biggest thing for me, I think, on this is there's a few different aspects we need to look into. So I think, as always, we need to look into the serve return dynamic. Now, Novak Djokovic has not been serving as well as I think, he has in recent times. And I think that's partly probably to do with the lack of match practice. Probably, I think his rhythm is not quite there as much as it has been in, I guess, the past or recent past. Now, 65% of first serves made against her catch, which is pretty good. 81% win percentage behind the first serve, 72% against her catch as well on the second serve, which is really impressive, by the way. That's really good. Of course, he had the walkover against Murray, which was a massive disappointment. We wanted to see that. And then against Monfils, 66% first serve percentage, 71% behind the first serve, 60% behind the second. Now, that's actually some really good numbers there. So far, actually, in Madrid, it's not looked terrible, but the first serve, as always, is a weapon. I feel and has been now for a couple of years. But more than just a couple of years, quite a few years. But the second serve, I think, is there to be attacked. And I think Alcaraz will try and attack it. And that could be quite a interesting dynamic when we get into the match because Alcaraz is a very good returner. He's not, at the level of the best returner ever, in my opinion, in Novak Djokovic. But if you look in the current generation and crop, he's up there as one of the best returners, I think, on tour. So for him, he's going to look to run around the backhand. And if Djokovic is especially going to go into the backhand side predominantly on the second serve, he may need to mix it up and go down the tee, especially on the ad side to the forehand and out wide to the forehand as well on the second serve. But there's a risk involved because if he does that, he then potentially goes into the forehand if Alcaraz is able to read it, anticipate it, and set himself early and rip a forehand, and get straight away into the point, not just in neutral, but actually in a positive attacking position straight away. So very, very interesting to see how that ends up panning out. But Alcaraz will definitely try and attack you. He'll go into him with a forehand. He'll go into out. He'll even hit a backhand as well. I mean, the backhand for me from Alcaraz is not a weakness whatsoever. It's a weapon, and also he's got some defensive capabilities on that side as well, including the slice, for example. So yeah, I think for me, a very, very interesting dynamic now. The other dynamics then come into it. For example, the backhand to backhand exchanges. Now, I don't think Alcaraz necessarily wants to be hanging with Djokovic on the backhand to backhand exchanges. I think he needs to kind of, go line when he can. And if he is going to go backhand to backhand, then he needs to do exactly what he did against Nadal and go hard at angles, low over the net, kind of, just dragging Djokovic out. However, by doing that, it opens up Djokovic to go down the line on the backhand. That is arguably Djokovic's best shot and one that he's able to exert and then execute on the stretch, almost in split. So I think if Alcaraz is going to do it, he needs to really execute it correctly. It's not going to be like how he had against Nadal, where he goes into his forehand and he's kind of on the stretch and it's wide and it's at his ankles. Djokovic he'll dig it out on that backhand side. It is the most reliable wing out of the two. So for me, if Alcaraz wants to have success, is in the forehand to forehand exchanges, and I think that's where he's going to have success. He needs to utilize his angles on the forehand. He needs to utilize the depth and power hit through the ball. Really let Djokovic know that he's there, rush him, and I think then he'll have some success. And of course, the drop shot as well, really crucial. And you might say, well, Djokovic is so fit, he'll get to them. Well, the same could be said about Nadal, but Carlos Alcaraz executed them to the tee for the most part in that quarterfinal, even against Nadal. And I think if he does the same thing, he will. Meanwhile, he'll definitely get some free points, but will he hit winners off that? Maybe not. But as long as he's following it up at the net, or I guess if he wants to hug the baseline and then try and pass Djokovic, that's fine as well. But I think ideally he wants to be moving forward. I think when Alcaraz is moving forward is when he looks his best, and we saw some serve volleys. I think he definitely needs to utilize that. Djokovic stands very far back, just like how Nadal does on the clay. Not as far back, but pretty far back still. So if I'm Alcaraz, I'm going out wide quite a few times as well, and coming into volley as well. We saw him serve volley today on actually match points, and I thought he did really, really well to hold his composure. So yeah, I think for me, Carlos Alcaraz then also needs to serve well. And the issue that he's had is that as soon as he serves a lot of first serves, that's great, winning easy service games. But then on the second serve, he's just struggling a lot to really kind of get through it. So yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup for sure. Djokovic versus Alcaraz. Cannot wait for it to happen. But yeah, the forehand to forehand exchange, I think Alcaraz can have some success there. So he needs to bang away at that. Drop shot, volleys at the net. For Djokovic, he needs to serve well. If he serves well, we know the returning comes with it. I mean, it just comes with it. Natural returning, such a gifted returner is Novak Djokovic. And then also potentially as well, if we look at it from not just the drop shot point of view, not just not just that, but and not just obviously looking at it from the serve return dynamic and the kind of basic ground stroke aspects. I think he might try and utilize the slice serve out wide Djokovic, but if Alcaraz is clever, he'll already be anticipating that, because that is the kind of go-to serve for Djokovic on the G side, especially early on. So if I was Goten, maybe potentially just just go for it there. But I completely lost my train of thought. Anyway, Novak Djokovic versus Carlos Alcaraz. It's going to be a cracker. Do not miss it. I am so excited for this one. I think also Alcaraz, if he utilizes the in-to-win forehand early and kind of goes into the Djokovic forehand is more liable to break down. So I think that's actually a good tactic, and it's almost the mirror image kind of idea that he would have utilized against Nadal. So, yeah, it needs to utilize that, and then the backhand on the line as well to set up and potentially put away balls as well. For Novak, I think he needs to be very, very solid. He needs to try and dictate with the forehand, which I think will be hard against Alcaraz. But the big issue that he's going to have is that I think the shorter points is exactly what Carlos Alcaraz wants. He wants shorter points. And then the longer points where Djokovic will probably think, oh, I can get into my own here. I should win the lion's share of points. Alcaraz is actually winning the majority of the points. So I think, yeah, got to be very, very careful to see, which way this one goes. I think let's be realistic as well. Look, it's easy for me to say Alcaraz is going to win, but Novak is such an incredible competitor and, of course, champion. And as I've said, in a lot of instances, you don't necessarily need, to be the most talented player to do well. It's just about working hard, and no one works harder than Novak Djokovic, from what I can see anyway, and those big three elites. Right, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Please remember to smash the like button, please, if you haven't done so already, and subscribe to the channel as well for more content like this. Also, do remember to rate and review the podcast on all podcast platforms. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't reviewed it, then do check us out. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe from our